The observation deck of Neutral Station 7 stretched across the entire eastern side of the station. Its walls were made of transparent aluminum, a material that could withstand anything and still let people see through it clearly. The stars beyond were bright and cold and endless. Princess stood at the edge of this vast empty space, her body made of crystal that caught the light from the distant sun. Her skin glowed with soft blue reflections, and anyone watching would have seen a figure that did not look human at all. Behind her stood her delegation, 3 men and 2 women, all from the Empire. They wore the same kind of crystal skin that wore, but theirs was a dull color compared to hers. They stood in perfect silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They had been trained since birth to be still, to be silent, to show no emotion. The Empire did not value weakness, and showing feelings was considered a weakness. Had traveled far to reach this station. She had left her home planet, passed through several systems, and crossed through space for many weeks. The journey was long and uncomfortable, even for someone as powerful as she was. But she had come here for a reason. She had come to meet the humans. The Empire ruled over many star systems. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They had weapons that could destroy entire planets. They had technology that made them the masters of their part of space. And now, for the first time, they had found another intelligent species that might be worth talking to instead of conquering immediately. That species was humanity. Had studied the reports about humans. They were strange creatures. They had warm blood and soft skin. They could not survive in space without protection. Their ships were slow and clumsy compared to vessels. Their weapons were basic and crude. Their governments were confused and split into many different groups. Everything about them seemed inefficient and poorly designed. And yet, they had somehow managed to spread across several star systems. They had built colonies. They had created technology that worked, if not as well as technology. They had survived in a harsh galaxy without help from any other species. The Empire had decided to attempt peaceful relations with humanity. It was a decision born from practical thinking, not kindness. There was profit in trade. There was advantage in having allies instead of enemies. And they did not waste energy on wars they did not need to fight. So had been sent to negotiate. She was the perfect choice. She was the Empire's princess, which meant she had power and respect. She was educated in all forms of diplomacy. She understood strategy and commerce and military tactics. She knew how to get what the Empire wanted from any negotiation. The meeting with the humans would be simple. She would explain what they wanted. The humans would understand that they had no choice but to agree. They would sign the papers, swear their loyalty, and agree to trade on terms that favored the Empire. Then would return home, and life would continue as it always had. She was certain of this. She had never been wrong in her calculations before. The doors to the observation deck moved open without any sound. Senses detected the arrival immediately. She could hear the heartbeat of the human male. She could smell the salt in his skin from the water he was made of. She could see the heat his body gave off. But she did not turn around. Turning around would be a sign of weakness, a sign that she had been waiting for him. The human spoke. His voice was low and careful, like someone who chose each word before speaking. "Princess, I'm Captain Jake. Thank you for coming to Station 7. We have prepared quarters for your delegation, and the conference room is ready whenever you wish to begin discussions." Jake had studied his file in detail. He was 42 years old, which made him relatively young for a human. He had served in military duty for 20 years. He had fought in several conflicts. His record showed strategic victories and 0 casualties among his soldiers. This was unusual. Most military officers had higher casualty rates. Jake had managed to win his battles while keeping his soldiers alive. This made him either exceptionally skilled or exceptionally lucky, was still deciding which. She turned slowly, letting her crystal body catch the light. She knew that her appearance was striking to humans. She had read that they found it beautiful or frightening or both at the same time. She wanted him to feel the weight of her presence, to understand that she was not just another creature to negotiate with. Jake was taller than she had expected. His skin was brown like earth. His eyes were dark, almost black. He wore a uniform that marked him as a military officer, though it was far simpler than the military uniforms. He stood with perfect posture, his hands visible and empty, a gesture of non-aggression. He was also smiling. Did not understand why he was smiling. There was nothing to smile about. They were meeting for the first time. There had been no exchange of humor or positive interaction. A smile made no sense. She spoke in her careful, measured way. "Captain, I have reviewed your species' military records. I confess that I was not expecting such formality from humanity. Your civilization is still quite young in galactic terms. I would not have anticipated such structured protocols." Jake's smile did not disappear. In fact, it grew slightly wider. "Well, we like to show our guests that we take them seriously, even if the negotiations might be brief." Felt something strange move through her crystal form. Was he suggesting that the negotiations would not take long because they would be easy for him, or because she would grow bored and leave? Was he attempting to challenge her authority? The statement was ambiguous and found herself uncertain about how to interpret it. "You believe our discussions will be brief?" she asked. Her voice carried no emotion, but inside her crystal core, something was moving that felt like uncertainty. "I believe," Jake said carefully, "that you came here expecting to tell us what terms we will accept. But what I am hoping is that you will stay long enough to actually listen to what we have to say. Sometimes the best agreements take time. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when people actually listen to each other instead of just planning their speeches." Now was certain that he was challenging her, but he was doing it in a way that did not seem aggressive. He was not threatening. He was simply suggesting, in a quiet and direct way, that perhaps her assumptions might be wrong. This was new. No one had ever suggested such a thing to before. She pulled in a breath of the station's air, a gesture she had learned would seem calming to carbon-based creatures. She was trying to stay calm, though she would not have admitted this to anyone. "Very well, Captain. We will listen to what you have to say. I am willing to keep an open mind." "That is all I ask," Jake said. Then he turned and walked back toward the doors. He did not wait to see if she would follow. He did not extend his hand in any gesture of connection. He simply walked, with the quiet confidence of someone who believed that others would make the right choice without being forced. And found herself following him, her delegation falling silently into step behind her. She told herself that it was because the negotiations required her presence. She did not admit to herself the smaller truth, that Jake had somehow made her want to know what he would say next. The conference room was on the third level of Neutral Station 7. It was a simple room with a long table made of metal and a floor of reinforced plastic. Large screens covered the walls, ready to display information or images or anything that the negotiators might need to see. Sat on one side of the table with her delegation. Jake sat on the other side with his officers and advisors. For 3 hours they spoke about trade. They discussed what the Empire wanted from humanity and what humanity might offer in return. The humans presented their proposals carefully. They showed projections of future trade. They explained their needs and their capabilities. They listened to what they wanted, and they asked questions when they did not understand. Found the process more challenging than she had expected. Jake did not simply accept her terms. He did not bow to her authority or show fear of power. Instead, he negotiated. He pushed back against unfair agreements. He found solutions that benefited both sides. He seemed to actually care about the outcome, not just about winning. This was not how negotiations were supposed to go. They always won. They always got what they wanted. They did not compromise. But found herself compromising with Jake, and strangely, she did not mind. They were deep in discussion about resource sharing when the alarms began to sound. At first, it was a low tone, a warning that something was wrong somewhere on the station. Then the warning became louder and more urgent. Red emergency lights began to flash in the corridors outside the conference room. The lights turned the whole world red and black and red again. Captain Jake was on his feet immediately. His hand moved to a device on his wrist, and he spoke into it with a voice that held no fear. "Station Command, this is. What is the situation?" The response came back fast. "Captain, we are under attack. 3 ships have breached the outer barrier. They are military vessels. They are targeting the station's main power core." Jake looked across the table his dark eyes were steady and calm. "Princess, I need you and your delegation to move to the safe sector immediately. My crew will escort you." His crystalline body felt cold. 3 ships. That was impossible. She had told her government exactly when she would be arriving and where she would be. The Empire had promised her safety. They had promised that no military vessels would be anywhere near this neutral station. But the attacks continued. Another explosion shook the entire station, and this one was much closer. The lights flickered and dimmed. Several officers from both delegations fell to the ground from the force of the impact. "The rebels," said quietly. She understood now. This was not an attack from the Empire. This was the rebels, the ones who did not want the peace talks to happen, the ones who wanted the Empire to remain focused on conquest and domination. Jake was already moving, guiding people toward the doors. "We need to go, now, every second counts." The corridors of the station were filled with chaos. People ran in all directions. Some knew where they were going. Others were simply running away from the danger. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow. The air smelled like smoke and burning plastic and fear. Jake moved through the chaos with purpose. He guided groups of people toward the safe sector. He checked on the injured. He gave orders to his crew members who were still on duty. Through it all, he remained calm. His voice never shook. His hands never trembled. He was the kind of person that other people wanted to follow because he seemed to know what he was doing even when everything was falling apart. Moved with her delegation, but her mind was racing with terrible calculations. The rebels were well armed. The station's defenses were not designed for a sustained attack from 3 military vessels. If the power core was damaged, the life support systems would begin to fail. If the life support systems failed, everyone on the station would die. There were 437 people on Neutral Station 7. She had reviewed the station roster when she arrived. She had counted them. 437 individuals who had nothing to do with the Empire's internal politics, but who would die because the rebels wanted her captured or killed. The logical response would be to surrender. If she gave herself to the rebels, they would have what they wanted. They would have no reason to destroy the station. They would leave, and everyone else would survive. She was considering this calculation when the call came through the station's communication system. It was a child's voice, small and terrified, transmitted through a speaker that was broken and crackling with interference. "Hello, is anyone there? The door is stuck. I cannot get out. The air is getting hard to breathe. Please, is anyone there? I am scared." The voice was young, perhaps 8 years old. It belonged to a child, someone who had not yet had time to live a full life, someone who had not made any choices that could have led to this moment. The child had simply been on the station, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now the air was being drained away. Sensors could tell her exactly which sector the child was in. Sector 9. That was a sector scheduled for decompression as part of the station's emergency protocols. In approximately 3 minutes, that entire section would be sealed off, and all the air would be vented into space. She heard Jake say, "I am going." One of his officers immediately protested. "Captain, that section is already compromised. The evacuation shuttles can retrieve the child once we have secured the station and pushed back the rebel forces." "No," Jake said simply. "The child does not have that much time. The child will die in 3 minutes if no one helps. I am going." He was already moving, running toward the corridor that led to Sector 9. He did not ask for permission. He did not wait for backup. He did not calculate whether this action would help his military strategy or improve his chances of winning the battle. He simply ran toward the danger, driven by something that did not fully understand. It was a choice that made no logical sense. It was inefficient. It was a waste of a military asset. It could result in his death. It was also the most human thing had ever witnessed. Without thinking about what she was doing, without calculating the consequences, followed him. Her delegation called out to her, but she did not stop. She ran after Jake, toward a sector that was losing its atmosphere, toward danger that her sensors screamed warnings about, toward a child she had never met and had no obligation to help. She ran because something in her crystalline structure demanded that she do so. She ran because somewhere inside her, something human had been awakened, even though she was not human at all. The emergency stairwell was narrow and dark. The emergency lights had failed in this section of the station, and only the red glow from the external alarms provided any illumination at all. Jake moved down the stairs 2 at a time, his feet making heavy sounds against the metal steps. Behind him, descended with the grace of her crystalline form, her body reflecting the red light like a moving ghost. The air in the stairwell was getting thinner, could sense it through her sensors. The pressure was dropping. The rebels had already begun the decompression sequence in Sector 9. They were not trying to trap the child deliberately. They were simply activating the station's emergency protocols, and the child had happened to be in the wrong place. Jake did not slow down. He did not check to see if was still behind him. He simply kept moving downward toward the child who was running out of time. They reached the corridor that led to Sector 9. The main entrance was sealed by a heavy metal door, the kind designed to protect the rest of the station if one sector became compromised. Jake stared at the door for only a moment before he reached for the emergency panel beside it. The panel was locked. The control system was not responding to voice commands. This was a seal that was meant to stay sealed, but Jake did not stop. He used his hands to rip open the panel, tearing away the protective cover to expose the manual override system beneath. His muscles strained as he pulled at the lever. It did not want to move. It was designed to be locked tight, to hold firm even under great pressure. But Jake pushed and pulled with everything he had, his face turning red with effort, his breath coming in hard gasps. Stepped forward. She placed her crystalline hand on the lever beside his human one. Her strength was greater than his. Together, they pulled. The lever began to move. It was slow and difficult, but it was moving. The door groaned as the locks began to disengage. The sound was loud and terrible, like the station itself was crying out in pain. The door slid open. The air inside Sector 9 was so thin that it was almost not there at all. The pressure differential created a wind that pushed against them, trying to pull them toward the open sector and the vacuum of space beyond. A child in a red coat was stumbling toward them, her face blue from lack of oxygen, her eyes wide and full of terror. Jake did not hesitate. He stepped into the thin air and grabbed the child. He pulled her close against his chest, shielding her body with his own. He did not waste time with words. He did not try to comfort her. He simply turned and ran back toward the open door, his lungs burning as he tried to breathe air that was no longer really air. Was there? She moved to help him and he staggered forward, nearly losing his balance. But he recovered without stopping. The child in his arms was coughing, gasping, her small body convulsing as it tried to pull oxygen from air that contained almost none. They made it back through the door. They had taken perhaps 10 steps into the corridor when the explosion came. The blast was massive and final. The emergency bulkhead sealed behind them with a sound like thunder, and Sector 9 became completely isolated from the rest of the station. Whatever had been in that sector was gone now, vented into the cold vacuum of space. Jake collapsed against the wall, still holding the child. His breathing was loud and ragged. His skin was flushed with exertion. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline and the raw human response to survival. The child was breathing now, though her breaths were shallow and weak. She was alive. She would be okay. Her small body had survived something that should have killed her. A team of station medics appeared in the corridor. They took the child immediately, carrying her toward the medical bay. They checked Jake for injuries. He waved them away. He was fine, he said, just tired. But was staring at him. She had lived for 317 years. She had studied every form of military strategy. She had learned about efficiency and resource management and the proper calculation of risk versus benefit. She had been trained to make decisions that kept the Empire strong and powerful. Jake had just risked his life, had run toward certain death, had placed himself in extreme danger to save one child. One small human child that he had never met before. One life that, in the context of galactic strategy, was completely insignificant. It was the most irrational thing had ever seen. It was also the bravest. She watched as Jake sat down on a bench, his powerful human body finally showing the strain of what he had just done. His hands shook as he pulled off his uniform jacket. His breathing gradually became more regular, but his eyes remained calm. He looked like someone who had done exactly what he needed to do and had no regrets about it. Sat down beside him. The bench was cold against her crystalline body. You knew the odds of success were minimal, she said. It was not a question. She could calculate the odds herself. They had been low, very low. Jake could easily have died in that sector. Jake looked at her. His dark eyes met her crystal gaze. Yes, I knew. Then why did you go? Asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the station continued its emergency protocols. Explosions rumbled in distant sections. Alarms continued to wail. But in the small circle of space around the bench where they sat, there was a kind of strange quiet. Because she was scared, Jake finally said. Because she did not choose to be on this station. Because she was alone and she needed help. Because some things matter more than winning. Some things matter more than survival statistics or military strategy or doing the logical thing. Some things matter just because they are right. Felt something shift deep inside her crystalline structure. It was not a physical change. It was something deeper than that. It was a change in how she understood the universe. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years by being logical, by calculating advantage, by refusing to waste resources on the weak or the insignificant, by understanding that some lives simply did not matter as much as others. But this human, this fragile being made of water and carbon, had just shown her that maybe the Empire had been wrong about something fundamental. Maybe they had been wrong about what actually made a species strong. The rebel commander's face appeared on the main of the station's command center. His name was, and he was Cousin. He had the same crystalline skin that she had, the same sharp features, the same cold gaze. But his eyes held something different than hers. They held hunger. They held the desire for power without limit. They held the belief that he deserved to rule and that nothing should stand in his way. Was smiling. "Hello, Cousin," he said, his voice smooth and certain. "I hope you are well. I am afraid that your diplomatic mission has come to an unexpected conclusion. I have placed explosives throughout the station. These explosives are very powerful. They can destroy this entire station in a matter of minutes. Everything and everyone on it will be gone. It will be as if Neutral Station 7 never existed at all." Jake stood beside, watching the screen. His officers were positioned throughout the command center, running calculations and planning defensive strategies, but could see in their faces that they knew the truth. They did not have enough time or resources to prevent this outcome. Continued speaking. Here is what will happen. You will leave the safe sector and you will come to the central hub. You will come alone with no weapons, with no protection. When you arrive, I will release the station. Everyone here will live. Everyone will go home to their families. All of this destruction can be prevented. All you need to do is surrender to me. Felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The calculation was simple and clear. 437 lives balanced against her own life. In any rational analysis, the choice was obvious. One life was worth less than 437 lives. Even the life of a princess, even the life of a diplomat. The mathematics was clear. She could see the decision reflecting in her crystalline skin, and she knew that could see it too, across the vast distance of space. Her cousin was waiting for her to accept the inevitable. He was waiting for her to understand that she had lost. "I will surrender," said quietly. "No," Jake replied immediately. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the command center turn to look at him. "You will not." Turn to face him. "Captain, the mathematics are clear. Your crew has calculated the defensive options. We have a 5% probability of success against the rebel forces. 5%. Those are not good odds. If I surrender, everyone on this station will live. That is the only logical choice." Jake stepped closer to her. His dark eyes were steady, and his voice remained calm. "With respect, Princess, you are wrong. They will not let anyone on this station live once they have you. Once has his prize, he has no reason to keep his word. He will destroy the station anyway, collect his victory, and return to the home world as the one who captured the princess who was betraying the Empire." Wanted to deny his logic. She wanted to believe that her cousin would honor his word, but she could not. Her sensors had detected the pattern of the explosives. They were not designed to be disabled. They were designed to destroy. And's eyes, the eyes of someone who believed that the ends justified any means, suggested that Jake was telling the truth. "Then we are trapped," she said. "Your defensive calculations show only a 5% probability of success. If I do not surrender, everyone dies. If I do surrender, everyone still dies. There is no winning outcome." Jake was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the stars beyond the stations. His jaw clenched, and she could see the muscles working beneath his skin. "There is another option," he said finally. "We fight." "Fighting will result in our deaths," said flatly. "Yes," Jake agreed. "It might. But at least we will die fighting for something that matters. At least we will die choosing what we believe in, rather than surrendering to someone who does not respect us. At least we will give those 437 people a chance to survive, instead of guaranteeing their deaths by handing the rebels exactly what they want." He turned away from the and faced directly. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. "Your empire trained you to think in terms of strategy and power, but you have spent the last few hours with me. You have seen what humans value. You have seen what we are willing to do for people we care about, for people we have never even met. You have a choice to make right now, Princess. You can be what your empire expects you to be, or you can be something more. You can choose to fight for something that matters not for yourself, but for everyone on this station. You can choose to believe that life is worth more than strategy, that compassion is stronger than force, that sometimes the 5% chance is worth taking, because the alternative is surrender." Felt the weight of his words. She stood in the command center of Neutral Station 7, surrounded by the humans who had shown her kindness and the technology that had been designed to protect them. She thought about the child in the medical bay, the one that Jake had rescued from Sector 9. She thought about the 437 people whose lives hung in the balance. And she thought about Jake, standing before her with his warm human blood and his fragile carbon body, asking her to believe in something that the Empire had never believed in. He was asking her to choose mercy over strategy. He was asking her to choose to fight for others instead of surrendering for herself. It was the wrong choice, by every measure of logic that they understood. It was also the only choice that felt right. "I will fight," said. Her crystalline skin began to glow with a new brightness, as if the light inside her was responding to her decision. "I will fight alongside you, Captain, and together we will protect everyone on this station. We will not surrender. We will not accept that logic is the only logic that matters. We will show him that there is a strength in compassion that his calculations cannot measure." Jake smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. He reached out his hand, his warm human hand, and she took it with her crystalline palm. "Then we have work to do," he said. The battle began at dawn, though dawn was a meaningless concept on a station floating in space. It was a designation that the humans used to mark the beginning of a new cycle, and Jake had chosen this moment to launch his counterattack. It was symbolic, understood. Humans seemed to value symbols and meaning in a way that they did not. The rebel ships had positioned themselves around the station, attempting to control all approach vectors. But Jake's strategy was not about controlling space. It was about controlling what mattered. He had organized his limited forces to protect the central hub, to preserve the communication systems, and to target the rebels' command structure. Moved through the battle like crystal lightning. Her superior strength and sensory capabilities gave her advantages that the rebel soldiers could not match. She could sense their positions through the station's walls. She could move faster than their weapons could track. She was a force that their military had never anticipated facing. But she was not fighting alone. Jake fought beside her, his human body moving with precision and intelligence. His weapons were not as powerful as hers, but they were effective. More than that, he seemed to know instinctively how to work with her, how to cover her weaknesses, how to amplify their combined strength. The rebel soldiers began to break under the assault. Some of them recognized, and they hesitated when they saw her fighting against forces. The message was spreading through their communications. The princess was fighting against the rebellion. The princess was on the side of the humans. This information was more powerful than any weapon. Discipline began to crack. Soldiers started to question their orders. Some of them laid down their weapons and refused to fight further. Others continued, but with less conviction. They had believed they were fighting to preserve the empire. But the princess had chosen to fight with the humans, which meant the rebellion was fighting against the empire itself. In the central hub, Jake faced directly. The rebel commander was powerful and fast, but his strength came from arrogance. He believed himself superior to both of them. He believed that force was all that mattered in the universe. Realized as they fought, that was weaker than she had anticipated. His crystal structure was more fragile. His movements were less precise. He had trained for power, but he had not trained for compassion. He had not learned, as she had learned, that sometimes strength came from protecting others instead of dominating them. Jake fought beside her, his human movements unpredictable and clever. He seemed to understand where would move before moved. He seemed to know how to turn the commander's own force against him. Finally. He fell not to a killing blow, but to precision and timing and the combined effort of two beings from different worlds who had learned to work together. Stood over her cousin, her crystalline skin glowing with the exertion of battle. She could have finished him. She could have made sure he would never threaten anyone again. But she did not. "Surrender," she said simply, "or I will be forced to defend my friends." The word hung in the air between them. Friends. She saw the moment when understood how far she had fallen from principles, or how far she had risen. His eyes widened with disbelief, and then with something that might have been shame. He did not fight back. He allowed himself to be restrained. The remaining rebel soldiers saw their commander surrender, and they understood that the battle was over. They laid down their weapons. Some of them cried. Others simply stood in silence, understanding that they had fought for something that no longer existed. The station was secured. The explosives were disabled by the engineering team. The wounded were carried to the medical bay. The 437 people who had been trapped in the safe sectors were released. They emerged into a station that was no longer under attack, with the knowledge that they had survived because a human captain had been willing to fight with a princess from an alien civilization. 3 hours later, stood in the observation deck. It was the same place where she had stood when she first arrived at the station, but she was not the same person who had stood there. Something fundamental had changed inside her crystalline structure, something that no amount of training could have prepared her for. Jake joined her at the viewport. The distant star was beginning to rise over the station's horizon, and its light caught in the crystalline patterns of her skin, making her glow like captured starlight. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Was quiet for a long moment. Behind them, the station was beginning repairs. The child from Sector 9 was recovering well in the medical bay. The diplomatic team was already beginning discussions about the possibility of extended talks, of a new framework for how humans and the could coexist. "I will return to my empire," she said finally. "But first I will record a message. I will tell them what I have learned. I will tell them that humanity's strength does not come from your technology or your military capability. It comes from your willingness to choose compassion. It comes from your ability to value individual lives. It comes from your strength to stand together for what is right, even when the odds are against you. I will tell them that they have been wrong about many things." Jake smiled. "And will they listen?" "Some will," said. "Not all, but that is always how change begins, with those willing to listen and those brave enough to speak the truth." She turned from the viewport and looked at Jake directly. His dark eyes met her crystalline gaze, and for a moment, the vast distance between their two species seemed to disappear. "I will recommend to the Empire that we enter into a true alliance with humanity," she said. "Not because it is strategically advantageous, though I believe it will be, but because you have shown me something that my people have forgotten. You have shown me what it means to be truly strong. You have shown me that the greatest power in the galaxy is not technology or military force. It is the power to choose to protect those weaker than yourself. The power to choose mercy. The power to choose to stand with someone different from yourself and call them a friend." Jake reached out and placed her crystalline hand in his warm human hand. They stood together, looking out at the stars beyond the station, two warriors from different worlds, united by the belief that some things mattered more than strategy. The sun rose over the station, and its light scattered through crystalline skin, creating patterns of rainbow and color that seemed to promise a new future. A future where humans did not compete for dominance, but worked together to build something better. A future that began with one princess and one captain, learning to trust each other, learning to fight together, and learning that sometimes staying calm in the face of danger was the bravest thing of all.